there we are. I had not started the recording yet. Now we have. Good. And under beta participation, there's this 4.1 stable. Otherwise, it's going to download version 4.2 of Blender. 4.2 will probably work, but the version of Cats that we're having everybody download is best used with version 4.1. Speaking of, this is optional for today's class, but if you want to dive into it, I think it could be valuable for everybody. We should download the Cats plugin. I have also put a link to that in the Blender Unity discussion channel. To download that, sorry, let's go ahead and I'm going to go to the website here. So I'm going to click on the Cats link and we will get right here. We can go click on this zip download, which will download the plugin. And then we need to go launch Blender. So launch it like normal. You will be greeted with the cube. There are many, many, many memes about the cube. You actually, little known fact, you actually can change what you spawn with by default in Blender. Also, this confused me at first. When you get to this menu, you can just click out of it. You don't have to really care. I assumed I had to click something there. You don't. Every default Blender scene comes with a cube, a camera, and a light. You can change this. You can make it so it spawns with nothing. Most people don't, and most people, I would have to say like 90% of people, the very first thing they do when they make a new Blender project is click and drag and hit delete. That is hilariously common. I think it's very amusing. Anyway, this is Blender. I will give the very basic overview of what Blender is and what we're looking at on this screen. I will highly recommend everybody, if you have not already done so, to go look at a Blender tutorial on YouTube. There are a whole bunch of them. There's one that I think is particularly valuable for most people, which is the infamous donut tutorial. I gave this as homework last week. Did anybody end up doing it? Don't feel bad if you didn't, but I'm curious.
I've actually done it before, although I wasn't in class last time.
Yeah, awesome. If you've done it, that's good. I think. Here, let me pull it up. This tutorial is very well known, and I think it's worth its weight in gold. It is long. It's about 4 hours of videos, and it took me maybe 8 or 9 hours to actually go complete it. But you see the end result here.
Open source 3D software.
I'm sorry. The end result here is this plate of donuts, and you animate a little scene. You have this little kind of countertop with some assets in the background that you just download from the internet. The goal of this tutorial, stated by Blender Guru, who's this guy, is to give you kind of a rough overview of everything Blender can do. Blender is a huge program. These things up here at the top are called workflows, and this is kind of a rough idea of everything Blender can do. The only real thing that workflows do is they set up your viewport to be what they estimate is going to be optimal for that task. So if I click on like shading, for example, it's going to pull up the material editor down here, where we can see our principled BSDF material. We don't have to worry about what that means for right now. We're going to stick with the layout for right now. We'll come back to everything else later. So Blender is a gigantic program, and they try to go through here in this tutorial and give you an idea of all of it. So you get the basic modeling. Well, part one is just how do you walk around Blender, get familiar with the tooling, get familiar with all the windows, all that stuff. Then they go into basic modeling. In this case, they make a torus, which if you're familiar with what a torus is, it's a donut shape. So you don't have to do anything too complicated to make your initial donut. You just make a torus. We can literally show that here by doing Shift A is the button I press. Going to add mesh torus. And we have a donut. It's an oddly shaped donut, but a donut nonetheless. Then they continue with sculpting the donut to make it look a little bit more irregular, adding some icing, adding some texturing, adding some sprinkles. and going into the detail of rendering in Blender. Basically everything past part 7, you don't have to care about for just VR chat. I still recommend doing the whole tutorial. I found it very valuable. But even just the first couple of parts, if you're at all interested in learning Blender in more detail, highly valuable. And then there's all sorts of other tutorials. I think there's a couple that center around like making a car that are really good for hard surface modeling. Hard surface modeling is the concept of making anything that is, well, a hard surface. So a car, an airplane, a toaster, versus making something soft like clothing or a humanoid avatar.
Basic.
What's up?
You use the shortcut Shift A to open like the menu for things to add, but what is the long way to reach this? Like, where do you find this in the menus?
I believe it's right up here.
Or in add?
Yes. And I should.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. And I should probably now dive into the actual topology. Sorry, go ahead, Wicked.
I was just going to say, yeah, I usually tend to use my mouse more heavily than the keyboard on stuff.
Good to know.
So thank you for that.
Yes. No, that's great. That's great information. I will cater things more towards the UI rather than shortcuts. I think that's a good idea. So I would be remiss to not give a overview of everything we're looking at in Blender as we start off here. Also, I received the feedback last time that the text was too small, so let me go ahead and fix that as well. There you go. Resize it there. Beautiful. Okay. Looking in Blender, the very first thing is the center of our window, the viewport. This is where we do all of our work. The viewport can be moved around by clicking and dragging your middle mouse to turn your camera, to rotate it. And you can hold, I have to remind myself which buttons I use. Geez. Shift and click and hold middle mouse to move around the scene. If you ever want to focus on an object, you can click on that object and hit period on your numpad. That brings your viewport directly to the center of that object. Obviously, use your mouse wheel to scroll in and out. That's how we move around our viewport in Blender. There's a bunch of things over here.
On the numpad?
Yes, period on the numpad centers on your view. So if you're way over here and you want to center on this thing, period on the numpad. Just works. I don't know the button to do that from the view here, but I bet you there is one. Somewhere. Not sure where.
Actually, how do you uncenter from it? Like for me, it's stuck in the center.
You should just be able to move around at that point by holding shift and clicking and dragging with your middle mouse.
That actually doesn't do anything.
Interesting. Can you share your screen?
When I shift and drag, it makes the selection screen.
Interesting. Are you comfortable sharing your screen?
Yeah. Are you dragging
yes,
with your middle
yes,
mouse
of course.
button?
One moment. Oh, the middle mouse. Okay,
yes.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Mouse. Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, that works.
Nope. That's good. Thank you for asking. I appreciate.
So then the focus is, yeah, that works.
Cool. Due to the highly technical nature of this class and this being my first time teaching Blender to somebody else at a really core conceptual level, please feel free to interrupt class with questions and we can share your screen, take a look.
Yeah.
Of course. So that's the viewport. There's a bunch of stuff over here for selecting objects. I really never touch any of this. You probably could. There's probably some cool stuff here. Click around on your own time to go find that. Next up, we have our top window. as I mentioned earlier, these are your workflows. So this is what changes all of the windows on the side of Blender to make it more customized for that particular task you're trying to perform. I find myself just sitting in layout a lot of the time, and then eventually going over to UV editing at some point. And like, that's it. I only use those two for most of my VR chat stuff. One thing that's very important to know about is this little drop down right here. This is our mode that we are currently in Blender, and it is a core operation. It might not seem like it's a core operation. A lot of things are kind of inconspicuous, but it's very important to know what mode we're in and to use this to change modes. There is a radial menu with some shortcut that you can use to change modes. I forget what it is. We can just use the drop down. If anybody remembers it, feel free to share.
Nope. Object and edit, you change them with tab.
Yes. Changing back and forth between just object and edit tab is super useful. We do that all the time. To get to sculpt mode and weight paint mode, which are going to be the other two things we're going to use today, using this menu is best, or there is some keyboard shortcut for the radio menu that I do not remember. But the long and short of it, going through all of these modes very briefly. Object mode is how we move around whole objects around the scene. If you ever want to manipulate, if you don't need to change anything about the object, you just want to move it around, we do that in object mode. Edit mode.
I found it.
Good.
Control tab.
Control tab. Beautiful. Thank you. Yes,
How
for
do you
those of
close
us.
it?
Yes, for those of us who are hotkey enjoyers.
Oh, exit. Close it.
Yeah, escape. Yep. For those of us who are hotkey enjoyers, control tab. I really should memorize this and put this into my repertoire after how many months knowing Blender, but we all learn things at our own pace.
I kind of just tested it. I tried Shift Tab, and that activates the magnet snap.
Oh.
So then I tried Control Tab.
I actually didn't know that. Cool. I've accidentally enabled the magnet before and didn't know why. Thanks. That saves me a lot of time. This is why we do these classes. I'm going to learn just as much as you all are. Hopefully. Continuing forward. The different modes that we have available to us. So edit mode is how we go change the vertices or change anything about any particular object. So we can click on this object here and go into edit mode. As we previously mentioned, just hitting tab will also put you into edit mode. This is the topology of this object in Blender. We have vertices. Vertices are a single dot or a vertex for the singular form. All models are made up of dots. A bunch of them. A whole bunch of them. Dots are connected, or vertices are connected with edges. Edges are these lines here. And a bunch of edges together make a face. At the end of the day, everything that you want to see on a model is just a collection of faces. To easily swap back and forth, there's 3 different modes for edit mode that we use all the time. It is this vertex mode, this edge mode, and this face mode. The hotkey to swap back and forth between these 3 buttons is 1, 2, and 3 on your keyboard. That is how we select the different operations we want to be performing. So if I want to be changing vertexes, I hit 1 and I can change and move an individual vertex. To move something in Blender, the shortcut is G. So I can tap G and move it around wherever I want to. And now we have this very oddly shaped part of our donut. If you squint, it's a sprinkle, maybe. We can do the same thing in edge mode. So if we hit 2, we can go to edge mode, click on any edge, and move it the same way. Hitting G, moving it wherever we want to, and clicking.
Where is that in the interface?
Up here in the top left.
No, I mean the moving that you activate with G.
Oh, I have no idea. Probably up here somewhere. Yes, found it. You can go here, click on this move, and then move it.
Oh,
like,
it's just the move.
with these guys.
Perfect.
I have not tried to do that. I have always just stuck with G in this case. And lastly, face mode, same idea. You can click 3, type 3, whatever, to go to face mode, click on any face, and then move it the same way we moved everything else. And it just works. That's the basics of edit mode at its core. We can click and drag to select a whole bunch of vertices at any given time to perform operations on all of them at once. One tool that a lot of people use is this one up at the top right. So I will talk about now all of the things up here. Everything up here is oftentimes going to contain your tool options as well as any viewport options. So we can change how our viewport looks here. There's these 4 buttons up at the top right. This is X-ray mode or wireframe mode to be able to see the wireframe of an object transparently. Solid mode, which shows you all of the faces solidly, I guess, as the name implies. Material preview. This, if you have a texture on the object, it'll show that texture. And lastly, render preview. Render preview applies some fancy rendering techniques if you choose to enable them in Blender to make something really pretty. A lot of times, if you see some sort of cool 3D animation in a YouTube video, if they made it in Blender, they used render preview to see how it would look. As a quick aside, there's 2 different rendering engines in Blender, a real-time rendering engine and a fancy rendering engine. Eevee is the real-time one. Basically, it's what you'd use similar to games, right? We need to render the whole object 60 times a second. It can't spend very long on that process, so it doesn't really look as good. Then there's this other rendering engine called Cycles. That's what, whenever you see an animation used in Blender, they probably rendered it in cycles, and it probably took 3 years for it to render the whole thing. It's no joke. Even the basic donut tutorial, when I pumped up the number of passes it performs, I think it took 4 hours to render that video on my graphics card. It was a 12-second video. You've heard of Pixar pouring in millions of dollars into computers for rendering their movies. Same idea. But that's just an aside. We don't really have to go into that, and we won't discuss it further as a part of this class, and unless anybody wants to talk about it afterwards. So, any questions on edit mode or object mode in Blender?
I discovered something by accident about this scope. Is it sculpting when you press the G and you move a face?
What was the question? Sorry.
No, it's not a question. It's just I discovered
yes.
something. So when you click on a face and press G to move it, if you press and hold the middle button, it will give you accesses that you can use.
Yes. That's a great tool. It'll snap it to the X, Y, or Z axes. You can also do that with hotkeys, the X, Y, and Z hotkeys. So you type G and then X, it will lock it to the X axis.
Oh.
And if you want to get really advanced about it, you can do Shift X, Y, or Z to make it move on everything but that axis. So I can do G and then Shift Z, for example, and it will only move on the X and Y axes, and it will not move in height, which could have obvious benefits. You could see why that would be valuable in modeling.
Yes. Thank you.
No problem. Quick little asides. That speaks to just the sheer number of hotkeys, and I'm sorry for speaking at hotkeys. I had meant to download a plugin that shows all of the different hotkeys I'm pressing. I forgot to do that. Whoopsies. It's this one right here. I can probably just keep talking while I download it. Should only take a second. Only I can't talk and do things at the same time. We'll see. Worst case, we abandon this and go back to class.
Chew bubble gum and walk. Oh no.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I don't even know how to enable it. We're gonna abandon that idea. This is a great lesson. Sometimes you'll download a plugin for Blender, you'll try to use it, and it will just die a horrible death with some Python error. That's common. Typically, it means that it was made for a different version of Blender than what you're trying to use it on. Blender is an ever-evolving tool. It's been around for a very long time, like 20 years or something. And as such, people have been making plugins for it for just about as long. And those plugins that are made for Blender 2, let's say, oftentimes just don't work in Blender 4. That's normal. Sometimes people will make unofficial forks of those plugins to like update them. It's annoying. But oftentimes you can just download an older version of Blender too. Oftentimes when I'm working in Blender 4.1, if I want to use a plugin that's only supported by Blender 3.5, I'll just open up Blender 3.5 and load up my project, and it usually works. Your mileage may vary. I don't know how universally that applies, but it's a good lesson. Moving on to other stuff up here on the top right of your viewport. This is also where we can go look at all of our different viewport overlays, which is this drop down right here. Very specific button. This is a whole bunch of very, very valuable tools. We'll not really cover many of them today. A couple of them that might come to value of you all quickly are this bones toggle, being able to check and uncheck this. If you're ever working on an avatar, looking at all the bones can be annoying. It can get in the way. And statistics. Statistics, turning on this toggle right here, allows you to see the number of triangles in your mesh. As we've discussed previously in last class with avatar optimization, you can only have up to 70,000 triangles in your avatar for it to be considered poor or better. Oh. So having access to these statistics is very valuable to know when you're going to be hitting that limit. For example, looking at my test avatar here, we can see that it's 63,000, right? So I'm always very conscious of this number. This is not really a great example because it doesn't have a head or anything else on it. Just some clothing. But you get the point. Lots of other stuff up here. We're not going to cover much of it. Feel free to look at that on your own time. Lots of cool things. I will oftentimes use this wireframe view here, which shows the wireframe even while we're not looking at the edit mode of the object. You can also turn down the opacity of that wireframe so that it's not quite so obvious. That can be very useful while doing modeling.
I think if you're in edit mode, you can also show normal direction, which is great because sometimes your normals get flipped.
Yes.
And they won't render. Or,
There's that face orientation.
I think you have to be on face. Oh, yeah, that works too.
Yeah. Well, there's a normal
older
direction.
version.
I actually don't know where normal direction is.
I think it might have been replaced by face orientation.
It might. It's got to be there, right?
Oh no, it was right there. It was under. Yeah, it's that one at the bottom.
Am I blind? Oh, right there. Okay, cool. Hey, normal direction. Cool.
It puts hair on your model.
Yeah, it's a free hair generator. Normals. What are normals? That's a good thing to take a brief foray into what that term means. Normals are simply the orthogonal direction from your face. So it's 90 degrees facing away from your face. That's obviously valuable for determining, I'm bad at describing this terminology, which direction the face is facing, I guess, right? That's what a normal is what if you were to aim straight down the normal, you'd be looking head on at that polygon. Lots of different manipulation of normals that we can perform. There are such a thing as making a normal artificially different than the polygon. We're not going to even touch on that. It's called split normals. As well as smoothing versus flat shading. So if you ever, obviously this donut looks a lot more like a donut than this does. I'm not sure I want to go into that right now, but we can talk about it afterwards. The rough idea is it's bending the normal smoothly across the face to make it seem like it's round, even though it isn't. Especially if we get rid of that wireframe view, this looks totally round, right? You can't even tell that it has faces on it, but it does. They're still there.
This looks very useful for avatars.
Extremely. We can go into a whole bunch of cool hard surface modeling stuff at a future time, but to give you like a sample of that idea, you can also do something called sharps, which if you have the whole model modeled smooth, sharp lines on your edges can break that smoothness, which gives you cool effects. So you can see how everything looks smooth except for that line we just marked as sharp. And it looks kind of like a bowl almost. Lots of very cool things.
I'm sorry, how did you pull out the normals?
That's this button up here. And then this button right here.
Perfect, thank you.
No problem. Tons of advanced concepts, and it's very difficult for me sometimes to pull myself away from diving into any one particular topic. But we only have an hour, and we're already, oh my God, we're already 40 minutes into it. Oh boy, I was overly ambitious with my lesson plan.
Put the clothes on the robot, Shinji.
I was very ambitious. Or perhaps I'm just covering things too slowly, but I think it's important to really dive into all these concepts and tailor the class to the questions being asked. So the other stuff on how Blender works. We don't have to worry about this thing down here. This is the animation view. We can ignore it. We don't have to care. We will never use this for VR chat stuff unless you really want to. Off on the right here, to show and hide this menu, you might have to press the N shortcut. This shows your right-hand menu of your viewport. A lot of plugins use this menu. So we can see here that I have Scent, which is Sense Robust Weight Painting Tool. I put a link to this tool in the Unity Blender discussion channel. You have to get it off Jinxie, and it's pay what you want, but you can pay $0. Although I recommend supporting creators, as I've mentioned. This tool will be super valuable for us when we eventually get to adding clothing to your avatar. This is also where you'd access cats if you've downloaded it. On the far right here, we have, you will use this a lot. We have our object hierarchy on the top right up here. This is where we see everything in our scene. So if I go to a more complex scene, we can have like all the clothing I have over here, right? So in this relatively complicated scene, not that complicated, I have our rig, this armature object here. This is our root object. This is where everything on our avatar goes. When we import our avatar from Unity into Blender, we will see one of these. It contains an armature, which has a whole bunch of bones on it. Your bones will probably look different. They will probably look like, oh God, now I can't remember where to find it. Leave it to me. Probably look like this. We can go over how to make them look like sticks. Sneak preview, it's right here. Because this is a lot nicer of a view. A lot cleaner, a lot less in the way. But those are the bones of your avatar. That's how we manipulate the arms and the legs, the chest, the waist, and the head. And then we have all of our individual objects here. So you can see all the different clothes. We have gloves, we have our pants, we have our shirt, etc., etc., etc. And then in this particular case, these are all a bunch of different meshes. So each one of these objects is a different mesh. So we have our sweatshirt here. We can see all the different vertices of the sweatshirt. We have our sweatpants here. We can see all the different vertices of our sweatpants. Also, I just hit a hotkey without describing it. Alt-Z will toggle on and off this button here, which is X-ray mode, which allows you to see through all of your objects. Okay. On a lot of avatars, when you pull them into Blender, you'll only see one mesh that will contain all of the avatar. That's a good thing usually. That means it's very performant. However, it can be a pain to separate those things. Cats gives us an option to separate them, which we will go into probably next class, although we can cover it after class today. I do plan to be around for a full hour after class is over at 9 p.m. Through 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. to discuss anything that anybody wants to discuss, just office hours style. So, lastly, on our tour of Blender, we have the bottom right menu. This is our object properties window. This is very commonly used. We have a whole bunch of different tabs here. This is all the different things that we might want to manipulate. This part is super confusing, and when I first tried to learn Blender, of course, I didn't use a tutorial. I just launched the program and clicked around, and I was like, what is all this? I don't get it. You can ignore most of these tabs. I think I've touched this tab like twice, ever. Versus this wrench here, this is the modifiers tab. You go to this tab every day. All of that is to just say, don't get overwhelmed. It's not that complicated. There's just a lot of different things. Blender can do a billion different operations. We only need a couple of them. But in this object properties window, we can click on, say, our torus and go look around at these different options we have available to us. This blue one, or green, this green one here called data is where we'll have our vertex groups and shape keys and UV maps. We'll discuss these in future classes, but we will make heavy use of all three of these things. And then the wrench modifiers tab is where we add modifiers to our mesh. I'll give you a sneak peek of what that looks like. For example, we could add an array modifier, which makes multiple of the object. If you ever want to make 40 donuts in a row, you can do it.
500 cigarettes.
Yes. Uh-huh. Oh man, that's funny. And modifiers stack with each other, which means you can do cool things. Like if you wanted, say, a stack of 463 cigarettes for the two of you that get the obscure meme, you can make two array modifiers and have one of them stack in the vertical direction, the other one stack in the horizontal direction, and make a tower of donuts. we have
a wall of donuts.
A wall
oh
of
boy.
donuts. Very powerful. Modifiers are ridiculously cool. You can do a ton of different things with them. You will only barely touch on that in the next couple of classes. I think there's some random YouTube video out there discussing every single modifier, spending like 3 seconds per modifier. It's YouTube's your friend. There's lots of good stuff there. And lots of bad stuff. I guess that's another thing to mention. Everybody has made Blender tutorials on YouTube, and a lot of them waste your time. Find a creator you trust that has made good content and watch their other content. Don't just blindly search. You'll often find pretty bad stuff. People like to waste your time. Or just don't know how to teach. Not that I'm an amazing teacher myself, but like, you get the point. Any questions on how Blender is laid out?
Can you show again how you made the donut smooth?
Yes, I right-clicked on it in object mode, and there's this shade smooth or shade flat.
Check mode.
There's also shade smooth by angle. Shade smooth by angle effectively just does that same sharp operation I mentioned, but does it automatically based upon how steep of an angle it is between the face. So I'll give it to you as a preview. Why not? If we hit shade smooth by angle, this is another important thing about the topology. I keep using the word topology, the layout of Blender. Down here at the bottom left, whenever you perform an operation, this little thing will pop up. It's very out of the way, very difficult to find if you don't know it's there. This is your tool options window. So if you ever have performed an option, this is how you can tweak exactly what it's doing under the hood. there will usually be a ton of options here. Shade smooth by angle just has these two. But you can see it has this angle definition here, 30 degrees. So shade smooth by angle will make everything that is less than 30 degrees between the faces, it will make them smooth. Anything that's more than 30 degrees between the angles, it'll make them sharp. So the end result is this thing where you can actually see what it defined as sharp and what it made smooth. So obviously all of this stuff jutting out is more than a 30-degree angle, so it made it sharp. And you can see that it has that sharp, well-defined edge here. And all this information carries over, by the way, into Unity. This is not like just a view option in Blender. This is core to how you make anything in Blender. I wish I had a good example. I do, actually. Yeah, sure, why not? I was debating whether to go and do it or not, but it's relevant. Aside while I pull this up, I was debating originally on how to release a syllabus for this class because I kind of wanted to have a schedule of 2 months worth of content. But I'm not sure how viable that is because I'm not sure what pace we're going to be able to cover content in. So I think I'm going to leave things a little bit more open and have just 1 or 2 key points I want to talk about any given day. And then anybody else can bring something else to the table if they're curious. Talking about smooth versus rough shading, I have a plane here. Ooh, we'll go over that later. Yep. We can see all of these blue edges where I wanted things to be defined as sharp so that you have a clear line delineating them, right? So obviously in a lot of hard surface modeling, we have this edge here and you want it to look like an edge. If this weren't sharp, you can right click and clear sharp. It looks smooth. Like it looks like it just flows, which is obviously not what you want. Good little aside. Very important for hard surface modeling. Still important for clothes, but less important. Cool. Anything else on the layout of Blender? Excellent. Am I moving too fast, too slow? Any feedback on that?
It's moving at the right speed. It's just that it can never really be too slow or too fast, because the thing is there's a lot of steps to take in Blender, and if you look away for 2 seconds and
yeah,
you lose the thread and you see like something on the screen where you're explaining something and I'm like, okay, how did we get here? And that is kind of why I keep asking, can you show again how you did that?
fair.
Because like, yeah, if it takes a lot of concentration.
Yep. Yes, I totally get that. And on that point too, that's why YouTube videos are oftentimes the best way to learn this material instead of a live class, because you can pause and rewind and just go back and see what they did.
You can't ask them what they did.
True.
It usually gives you a lot more information than rewinding.
Fair. I guess there's a place for both.
Yeah.
Wicked, you were going to say something?
I was just going to say, which is why we're recording this.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Although I should probably make a little bit more of a succinct version. I was recommended yesterday to make short videos that people can catch up with, and I will probably go ahead and do that.
Do clips of the class.
I could, but I think I can probably fit a lot more information into a concise video. I don't know. Well, I'll think on it. But the whole video of the class will also be available, minus the first 3 minutes. I forgot to hit the record button. Whoopsies. So much for telling you didn't have to record.
Oh, I'm recorded.
Ah, you're the best. I appreciate you. So now, all of this being said, I want to actually get our model and put it into Blender. In Unity, we have Clara. Clara is just one object plus an armature. which is all of our bones. We've already discussed how to get to the FBX folder in this models folder. And we've right-clicked and opened in Explorer to be able to grab the folder that the FBX is in. I'm going to copy this path. It's going to make our life a lot easier in just a second. 2, grab our model and put it into Blender. We're going to open up our Blender project. I'm going to create a new project to get rid of this silly donut. And get rid of everything in the scene, like we always do. To get it into Blender, we're going to hit File, Import, FBX. Then we're going to paste our file directory in here. Click on Clara Halloween and hit Import. We shouldn't have to modify anything over here. And just like that, our gigantic Clara has arrived.
So this may not be the reason why, but I was thinking about it earlier. I recently had to make one of my models like way taller than 2 meters to get the weight painting to work.
Interesting.
Like apparently Blender's got something where if you have too many vertices, like there's not enough distance between them, the automatic weight painting won't work. So if I had to guess why this is all blown up like this.
Interesting. I also use Sense weight painting tool. I don't use Blender's automatic, although there's like the automatic with bone weights or whatever that you have to use Blender for. We really should cover Sense weight painting tool, but we are running low on time for the class, so I'm debating how far we really want to go today. This is Clara, the avatar. Let's say that you wanted to, I don't know, what's something small we can do in Blender? Gosh. I really want to cover adding clothes, but that's a bit much right now.
Make the boobs bigger.
I was trying to avoid that.
Longer fingers, bigger hat.
Longer hair.
Sure. I like all of these suggestions. Firstly, this hat's kind of getting in the way, right? If we want to go modify the hair, let's make the hair a little longer, right? The hat is going to be a bit of a pain. If we installed cats earlier, by the way, I don't think we discussed this, to add cats, file, or edit, preferences, add-ons, install. Find your zip, and then click on this checkbox to enable it. Just like that. Boop. Lots of different ways to just go get this hat and kind of move it out of the way for now. One way is to separate it from the current mesh into a new mesh. If we look right now, we only have this body and nothing else. This body encompasses the body, the head, the hat, everything. So, depending on how it's split into its materials, which is this tab down here, we can go look at all of the different materials that are used to create this, this avatar. I'm going to shortcut real quick. Don't mind me. Explaining all these operations will take a while. Just trying to find where the hat is. It's somewhere. Gotta be somewhere. Oh, it's literally called hat. Oh my gosh, I'm gonna cry. Cool. We have a material just for our hat, which means this is gonna work really easily. In cats, we have a button. I don't know where this button even is. I don't use this application very much, but I'm trying to encourage the use of it because it is useful. If only I knew where the heck the option was. Jeez. I'm trying to find the separate by material option. It's in here somewhere, right? Dear God.
It's in other options, by the way.
Oh, what, sorry?
It's in other options.
Oh.
Yeah. You scrolled past it.
Am I just blind? Oh, thank you so much.
There.
Cool.
You're welcome.
I don't use cats. I have a hard time. Anyway, in cats, again, you can use N to open up this menu if it's not already open. In other options, we have the separate by materials. A couple of other options here, but I'm going to click this. And it's going to make a whole bunch of new meshes off on the object hierarchy on the right over here. One of which is our hat. And now that the hat is separate from the rest of them, we can hit this eyeball and hide it. Also, these bones are getting in the way. A couple of different options we can use to deal with that as well. One option is to hide them. Up here at the top right, we have viewport overlays, and there's bones. You can uncheck that, and they go away. Another option, and this is the more advanced option, but I really like doing this, is to click on armature over here, click on this little running guy down here, go to viewport display. What's up, Lo?
Separate them again.
In cats, if you've opened up the cats tab, have you found this tab?
Yeah.
Go to other options, separate by materials, and just click on that.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. Cool. Yes, so to hide the bones or to make them a little bit nicer to deal with, click on the armature, click on the little running guy, viewport display, display as stick. The octahedral view is just annoying. It shows you directions. That's valuable sometimes, not usually. So make it stick. And then I also check this in front option. This makes sure the bones always show up even when we're not in X-ray mode. Also very valuable. Now that our hat is out of the way, we need to make this hair longer. This hair is made up of a whole bunch of vertices. We could go click on each individual vertex if we wanted to, and move this one down, then move this one down, then move this one down. We're not going to do that. That's absurd. That would take us hours. And there's even shortcuts to doing that, like this proportional editing tool, which moves a whole bunch of things at once. We're still not going to do that. That will also just make a very uneven result. What we're going to do is sculpt. So whenever you want to change how something fits just a little bit, or you kind of want to manipulate it in a very organic way, sculpting is the way to do it. To do that, we're going to make sure that we are looking at the hair in object mode. And then up here at the top, go to sculpt mode. The quick overview of sculpt mode is that on the left here, we have a whole bunch of different options. Each one of these things does something different to our mesh. We can also change the strength and the radius of this tool that we're using. So this tool that I'm going to use is the grab tool. It's the second yellow one. This allows us to grab parts of the mesh and move them around. Whoa. Control Z to undo. One other very useful thing when you're doing sculpting is this symmetry option up here in the top right. So I'm going to click this X axis button. And now whenever I make a change to one side, it makes it to the other. Keep our hair symmetrical. And with the grab tool, I can just click and pull down. Might not look very good at first, but that's fine. Trying to cover the basics. And, just kind of move it around as you see fit. You can change your strength and your radius whenever you want to. And kind of make it look correct. Move it around the quote-unquote ear again. Make it longer on the sides. Make these bangs a little longer, right? Make this front bang a little longer, but maybe I want to keep it up. Maybe I want to keep this eye shown, so I'll undo symmetry for a little bit here to pull this guy up. And bam, longer hair. There are lots of different tools here, but you will make extensive use of the grab tool. It is the #1 most used sculpt option. Other notable ones that I will not go over are the inflate tool, the smooth tool, the elastic deform, and nudge are my top 5 if I had to give a list. We can go over those in more detail later. Any questions on the basics of sculpting? Cool. Alrighty. Now that we have done that, we can briefly cover how to get this back into Unity. Now, we are at the end of class, and I don't want to keep anybody over. I want to respect everybody's time. But I do want to at least finish what I said I would tell you before the end of class. So I will speed through it, and we can go over any further questions later. To recombine all of these things together, first off, I'm going to show the hat again. I'm going to click on one, shift click on the next to select all of them, and then hit Control J for join. I believe you can do this up in this object menu as well, right here. Join. That will take everything and rename it back. Notably, this is a different name now. We should need to rename it to what it was originally, or all of your animations will break. Fun topic for later. I think it was named Body. I hope it was named Body. Otherwise, we're going to have a hard time later. To export. Exporting is a huge pain. I will go over this briefly again and go over it in more detail later. The rough idea behind it is we want to go to File, Export, FBX. The default options that are over here will not work. They will not do you well. There's a couple of things you have to change. You have to uncheck Add Leaf Bones under Armature, and you have to apply Scaling's FBX All. Those are the only things that you need to do. And you don't even technically need to do those, but you really should. Then we're going to go find our folder again. And for the sake of this tutorial, we're going to put it in a different name. We're not going to overwrite the original FBX. There are cases where you do want to overwrite the original FBX very carefully. You shouldn't do that right now.
When I'm importing and exporting, I actually use the CATS plugin, and I find that it avoids a lot of errors.
I don't know why this is showing up here, and I don't know. Yeah, we probably should do that, shouldn't we? Excuse me? Thank you. Yes, CATS does have an option for this. At the very top of CATS, we have this exporter. I probably should have just used that to start with. Silly me. And export model. This is telling us that it's unoptimized. You can ignore it for right now. Go over it later. Continue to export. Select your folder.
I don't change any of the export settings when I use CATS. I don't know if I should touch anything.
Nope, you don't have to, actually. I should have remembered that. I completely forgot. Again, I'm so used to doing it manually, I forget the tooling exists. CATS does this all for you. It automatically puts in the right options. And we can hit export. One option that it doesn't have is selected objects. Sometimes you only want to export certain things out of your scene. But for right now, I have everything I want in the scene, so we're good. Export FBX. And that's done. To pull it back into our scene in Unity, we have this new FBX here. And we can click and drag it and put it into our scene. And we're going to see a lot of problems with it. There's a lot to be done. Jellyfish, yes, jellyfish robot. Perfect.
Oh, SpongeBob.
There's a lot to be done here to make this usable again. Oftentimes you will just overwrite your existing FBX. And for the sake of showing you how it works, I will go ahead and do that. I will usually take my current FBX and make a backup of it. This is my very jank process, is to rename it .back, hit save, hit yes. Don't tap back into Unity when doing this or everything will break. This is a really jank process, but it's you know what I do. There's probably a better option. And then I save back under the original file name and tab back into Unity, and bang, it just applies. It just works. We now have our longer hair. There's a lot to dive into there. We're not going to do that right now. But that is the expedited version of how to export our FBX back into Unity and see our changes applied to our model. When just dragging and dropping this FBX in, the reason why this looks so strange is because we need to reapply our materials, as well as copy over any changes that have been made to the FBX in Unity. There is a special plugin called Pumpkin's Avatar Tools, which I don't have installed in this project. It's scuffed. that can help with that process. But we're going to have to cover that next week as we are out of time.